Have you ever been learning a new skill and you saw a master of that skill do something that just seemed completely out of reach for you, yet you really wanted to do it? Well, that is what happened with me when I saw a YouTuber making a river table around 5 years ago. So it's taken me 5 years to build up the skill set and, arguably more importantly, the confidence to take on a project like this. And in this video, I'll be building a river table. Actually, two. So stick around. See how it turns out. I was recently watching a video by Four Eyes Furniture, and Chris mentioned the Rockler Try That Challenge. I was excited to hear about it because I was already planning on building this river table, or these river tables, I should say. And the theme of the competition just really aligned well with the fact that this was something that I had wanted to do for years now and was finally taking on that challenge. So these end tables are my entry to the Rockler Try That Challenge. I really love the spirit of this Rockler competition. It's to try new things and step out of your comfort zone, do something that you've always wanted to do but were held back for one reason or another. I decided to really go all in on that idea, and in this video with this project, I tried 5 new things that I've never done before. The first of those was working with a live edge slab. So I went into this expecting that for the most part, working with a live edge slab was going to be pretty similar to working with dimensional lumber. I mean, wood is wood, right? Well, I hadn't considered that I was going to be cutting through material thicker than I had ever cut through before. Let me just say, if you're ever in need of a big old bite of a humble sandwich, just record yourself doing a project and then go back and watch it later. Earlier I mentioned learning a new skill and having a goal that you want to achieve with that skill. And I'm curious if you've ever had that experience. If so, I'd love it if you'd drop a comment below and tell me all about it. As I mentioned, I'm building 2 end tables. So now that I've got this slab cut in half, I'll go ahead and rip them down the middle so that I can form the river. Something else I hadn't considered with the live edge slabs is that they tend to have a lot more figuring in the grain, and this can result in more tear out when you're planing it. And no matter how many videos I've watched of people removing bark and cleaning up a live edge, that did not prepare me for the amount of work it actually takes to get that done. The slab I'm working with is silver maple, and I got it from Hamilton Lee Supply. It's the first time working with them, but they seemed like really nice people and it was a really easy process. I would definitely recommend their slabs and will probably be purchasing more from them in the future. Okay, having cleaned up the live edge and cut the slab up into the 4 pieces, I'm going to let this wood breathe for a while and I'll pivot and get started on the table legs. So I wanted to do something of a mid-century modern style for these legs. And I was looking around, checking out different things for inspiration, and I came across Chris at Four Eyes Furniture's spider table that he made. It's a coffee table. It really looks awesome, and I really like the way the legs look, so I'm going for something real similar to that. For the legs, I'm using white oak that I ordered from the Woodworker's Source. I've ordered wood from them before, and so far it's always been a great experience. I needed to cut a taper on the legs, so I threw together a sled to help me do just that. So if you're still watching at this point, hopefully that's a sign that you like the content, and if so, I'd like to ask you to subscribe to the channel. I'm going to continue making more videos and hopefully continue to improve the quality of them. So, if you like this, definitely give it a like and subscribe. And if you don't like it, still give it a like and subscribe. Now, switching back over to the tabletop, these cuts of the slab are not flat, so now I need to make a sled and run them through the planer to flatten them. When I'm waiting for things like the hot glue to harden, it's nice to step outside and spend some time with the dogs. It's kind of funny though how dogs can be so different. I feel like we're playing 3 different games here. I'm trying to play fetch, the traditional game. I throw the ball, dog gets the ball, dog brings the ball back. Marshall seems to be playing king of the ball. I throw the ball, he gets the ball, he runs victory laps around with the ball. And Nala just simply seems to be playing catch Marshall. I picked up this rigid planer on a Black Friday deal, and I couldn't have gotten it at a better time. It was super useful in flattening out these cuts of the slab, and I don't know that I would have been able to do this project without it. Let me just say, this part of the process sucks. Getting this hot glue off of the wood is such a pain, but you gotta do it because if not, it's gonna gum up your planer blades, and you don't want that. So I had this pine laying around the shop, and I thought, maybe I'll make a nice apron for the table. I mean, who doesn't like pine mixed with maple and white oak, right? Except for, I guess, everybody. So maybe I'll just use this to make the mold instead. At the beginning of the video, I mentioned 5 things that I've never done before. The second on that list is a deep pour with epoxy resin. Now, I've done a lot of work with resin, so you might think that this would be no big deal for me, and that, I should just be able to take this like any other resin pour I've done in the past. But when you're dealing with deep pour epoxy, it's a completely different beast. It's a lot thinner, it's runnier, so I'm a lot more concerned about leaks than I have been with past pours. Another factor that concerns me with the leaks is that deep pour epoxy has a much longer setup time. So if it is leaking, it's going to be leaking for a lot longer. There did end up being some leaks, and I was really kicking myself because I was intending to pick up some flex paste before I did the pour, and I just completely forgot to. Fortunately, I was able to stop the leaks with caulk, but flex paste would have definitely made it a lot easier. Now that I'm waiting for the epoxy to cure, I'm going to shift my focus back to the legs. I recently added this push block to my shop made by Miles Craft. I love it. It is really useful, especially for cutting thin strips. You'll see that a little later in the video. But yeah, I'm super happy to have it. So here we are, almost 12 minutes into the video, and I still haven't shown you the design for these tables. So let me pull those up here. And also, this is the third thing that I had never done before. I haven't ever built furniture that I had designed myself. So here it is. I'm not great with SketchUp, so please go easy on me. This is just a rough representation of what the tables are going to look like. So once glued up, the top and the bottom of the legs are going to form a 108-degree angle. There's really no rhyme or reason to that angle that I landed on. I was just playing around with it in SketchUp and just kept moving it around until it seemed to look right to me, and that's what I landed on. Here I'm just trying to match the tops and bottoms best based on the wood tone. So my shop has a major shortage of clamps, and I often find myself having to resort to utilizing tape in all kinds of creative ways just to get my glue ups to stay where I need them. Okay, so now I'm scuffing the epoxy since it's already cured because I need to pour another layer to make up for what was lost with the leak. Time to pull the sled out again so that I can cut the taper on the top of the legs. I gotta say I'm super happy that I made this sled, not just for this project, but it's going to come in really handy down the road. Now I can use this to cut a straight edge on rough cut lumber, which will come in really handy since I don't have a jointer. I want the legs to come off of the centerpiece at a 45-degree angle, so here I'm cutting those miters. So between my son and my two dogs, my living room tends to be treated like a parkour course. So I need these tables to be rock solid. I don't believe the joint between the top and the bottom of the legs is going to be strong enough. So I made a splining jig, and I am cutting a spline into those joints to reinforce them. So earlier I mentioned that the push block came in really handy cutting the thin strips, and here you can see that. I really love the support that can drop down and match the height so that it's not wobbling as you're pushing it through. This was so much easier and safer than pushing it through with a push stick. Trigger warning for those who are bothered by messy glue ups. I used way more glue here than I should have, but I just really wanted to make sure that these splines were properly set. Now that the epoxy's cured, it's time to demold the tabletops. The first tabletop came out really easy. I used mold release on both molds, but this second one was just a nightmare. Now my new planer only goes up to 13 inches in width, and these tabletops are about 16.5 inches. So I'm gonna bring the tabletops out to my friend's shop and utilize his 20-inch planer. Now earlier in the video, I mentioned that there were some struggles with working with a slab versus dimensional lumber. One of those struggles I mentioned was that the grain pattern is a lot more figured and you have some pretty wild curls. And that can result in some tear out. Well, that's exactly what happened, and unfortunately, it happened a lot. Since I already needed to fill the cracks and the knot holes with epoxy, I went ahead and sanded out all the sections that had been torn out by the planer, and I filled those with epoxy as well. While the epoxy cures, I'm going to switch back over to the legs. Now that the splines have dried, I can use my flush trim saw and cut those, well, flush. Since the flush trim saw rarely actually cuts things flush, I'm using a chisel and my block plane to actually get it flush. Now, given the tight deadline that I'm under, if I were a smart man, I'd probably just put a round over on these legs, glue them up, and call it done. But I'm not a smart man. So instead, I'm going to put a black walnut inlay on the legs. I'm using some scrap black walnut that I had left over from a chessboard that I built a few months ago. I made a video on it. I'll put a link at the top. You might enjoy it. This featherboard here is new to the shop too. Once again, another super helpful tool that's really helped me step up my game. I'm considering picking up a thin rip jig. If you've used one, I'd love it if you dropped a comment below and let me know what you thought of it and which one you got. In hindsight, I probably should have cut these strips just a little bit longer so that I had some excess to work with, but in the end, it ended up working out. So I feel like I'm starting to get better with my block plane. This one is horrible though. It's a real pain to set. So I'm thinking about picking up a new one to replace it. If you have any experience with some good block planes and you have one you'd like to recommend, I'd really appreciate a comment down below. I love the aesthetic of combining hard edges with softer curved edges. So I'm putting a round over on the front of the legs and just putting a chamfer on the back of the legs. So I need to cut two pieces to serve as, I don't know if it'd be called the base. The tabletop's not actually going to be touching it, but it'll be the centerpiece that the four legs joint. If you know what this should be called, please, by all means, let me know in a comment. So off camera, I cut a sort of floating mortise and tenon, I guess you would call it, into the centerpiece and the legs to just give those joints a bit more strength. All right, well, with a successful dry fit, it's time to glue up the legs to the centerpiece. This is the fourth new thing that I tried in this project. I've never done such a complicated glue up with 5 different pieces all at the same time. So this was quite a challenge. This is actually the second set of legs getting glued up. The first one was such a train wreck that I couldn't even really get any good footage out of it. Switching back to the tabletop, the epoxy fills have cured and I can now clean that up with the block plane. There is one spot where the tear out was on the edge, so rather than try to fill that with epoxy, I'm going to do a wood repair. Now I know there's people out there that could do this repair by removing a lot less material, but I'm still new to this whole game, so this is the best I could do. So here I'm sanding with 80 grit just to, remove the material as quick as I can. I do come back later and sand it up to 220 grit, but I'm not going to ask you to watch all of that. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I want to put a 45-degree chamfer on the bottoms of the tabletops. Fortunately, these tabletops are small enough that I can fit them on the table saw, so that makes cutting these chamfers a lot easier. In theme with the legs, I'm putting a round over on the top of the tabletops, opposite the chamfer on the bottom. So now I'm going to use my chisel and carve out the shape that I want that base to have. There's certainly smarter and easier ways to do this, but I don't have a ton of tools in my shop yet, so this seemed like the best way for me. This portable drill press by Milescraft came in really handy in drilling the holes through the legs and into the tabletop for mounting. It is a little wobbly, so you do still have to, put a little effort into keeping it straight up and down, but it really helps. With this part, I really couldn't figure out a good way to even use the portable drill press, so I just had to freehand it. I'm using threaded inserts to attach the base to the tabletop. I did drill the holes in the legs oversized so that there's a little bit of wiggle room for the bolts to account for wood movement, though I really don't expect much given how close the mounting holes are to the resin. And now it's everybody's favorite time. I'm putting on the finish and we're going to see it all come to life. The finish I'm using is Natura One Coat Clear. It's a hard wax oil similar to Rubio. It's a lot cheaper though, and I recently saw, I want to say it was the Wood Whisperer that did a review of all the various hard wax oil options that we have, and Natura One Coat actually came up on top in many of the categories. So I'm giving it a shot, and so far I have to say I'm just as pleased with it as I am with Rubio. I'm using this really fancy tool to spread the finish around. This is actually a template for a cutout for a cat door that we got recently. And it was just laying around the shop, seemed like it would work well. The application is really similar to Rubio as well. You spread it around and then work it into the grain with some sort of mildly abrasive pad like a Scotch-Brite pad, and then you wipe it off minutes later. I'm pretty happy with how the repair turned out. I didn't match the tone great, but it still looks pretty good to me. And now for the final reveal. Also, the fifth new thing I tried in this project, building a river table. Well, I hope you enjoyed watching me build this project. Building these river tables was an awesome experience for me. If you did enjoy it, please give the video a thumbs up or let me know in a comment below. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.